All right, welcome back to English BookCast. So today we're diving in something pretty interesting.
Yeah.
A Voyage into Tartary from 1689
Ooh, very cool.
by Heliogenes De L'Epy.
Okay.
So, I mean, just the title alone right away gets you kind of thinking like, okay, this is going to be
Yeah, here we go.
this is going to be fun.
Absolutely.
And as always, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, we'd love for you to join the channel and tell your friends all that good stuff.
Spread the word.
Yeah, spread the word.
All right, so Tartary 1689.
Yeah.
What do we got? What kind of sources are we dealing with here?
Well, so it's really a personal account
Yeah.
of this guy, De L'Epy, going through Tartary. And he's actually also describing parts of Greece and Turkey.
Okay, interesting. So a little wider scope than just the title that's on.
Yeah, he kind of, it's framed as a personal account.
Right.
So he's telling you about his journey.
Oh.
But he's also taking the time to describe a lot about, what he's seeing there and the people and the customs and the beliefs.
Gotcha. So it's personal, but also trying to give a broader picture of the places he's visiting.
Exactly.
Nice. And the book starts with the dedication.
Yeah,
right?
It does, yeah. And it's a very, right away you can tell that he's trying to
Make an impression.
make an impression.
That's that.
Yeah, there's this reverence for this lord that he's dedicating it to. He even mentions his lineage going all the way back to William the Conqueror.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
a pretty significant figure then.
Yeah.
So like setting the stage for something important.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
And then he goes on to describe himself as a very severe censor of my own works.
Okay, that's a bold statement.
Yeah, so right away you're like, what does he mean by that?
Yeah, what's he going to be censoring?
Right.
And why is he even telling us that?
Yeah, exactly. And then he says that he's doing this not for his own reputation,
Right.
but for the future knowledge of his children.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, it is kind of nice,
Well,
right?
Yeah,
Because they were living in a foreign land, and he wanted them to understand their origins.
that's beautiful.
It is, yeah.
Adds a whole other layer to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get the sense that this is a carefully crafted account.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump into the journey itself.
Okay, so right away in the beginning, he's talking about encountering people who are living
Yeah.
essentially like animals.
Okay.
He describes them as living a manada dos anime,
I see.
without states, without laws, naked and feeding on acorns.
Wow. That's a pretty stark description.
It is, and what's really interesting is he connects that to
To what?
reports he had heard about America.
Interesting. So he's making a connection between different parts of the world
He is, yeah.
based on, I guess, what he's heard or read.
Right, and it really shows you how Europeans at that time were.
Yeah, how they were looking at the world.
Yeah, they had this idea that there were these different stages of civilization,
Right.
and obviously European society was at the top,
Right, of course.
and everyone else was kind of placed on these lower rungs.
Yeah.
And it could be seen as primitive or uncivilized or whatever.
Yeah. It's a pretty limited perspective looking back on it.
It is, yeah, very much so.
It definitely lacks nuance.
It does.
And unfortunately, it was used to justify some pretty awful things.
Yeah, colonization and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a good reminder that even someone who's writing a personal account like this, it's still filtered through their own biases and worldview.
Definitely a product of their time.
Mm.
So, okay, we've got this kind of hierarchical view of civilization.
Yeah.
What else? What other kinds of observations does he make early on?
Well, he tells this funny little story about a lady.
Okay.
He describes her as impertinent,
Okay.
and she refused to believe that French people could speak any dialect other than her own.
Really? So she's like super narrow-minded.
Yeah, totally. And he uses it to make a broader point about how people can be so narrow-minded in general.
Right, not just about language,
Right, exactly.
but about all sorts of things.
Mhm.
It's that classic, my way's the only way kind of thinking.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's something we still see today.
Oh, absolutely.
Like people get stuck in their own little bubble.
Yeah, their own little world.
And they think that's how everyone else is, too.
It's so human.
It is.
Even centuries later, we're still doing the same thing.
Totally.
So De L'Epy's picking up on these, like, timeless human quirks.
Mm,
I like that.
yeah.
Okay, so what else is he thinking about as he's setting out on this journey?
Well, he starts to kind of get philosophical.
Okay.
And he wonders why more people haven't written about these distant places.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, and he thinks it's because of a lack of either courage
Mm-hmm.
or curiosity.
So basically, people are either too scared to go
Yeah,
or they just don't care enough to bother.
exactly.
That's a pretty bleak view of humanity.
It is a little bit.
But I guess it kind of makes sense for the time.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Back then, travel was a huge undertaking.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't really reliable maps or anything like that.
Right.
So it was a big deal to venture out into the unknown.
It took a certain kind of person.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's questioning why more people aren't exploring.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the people who do explore? What's his take on their accounts?
Well, he's actually pretty skeptical.
Is he?
Yeah, he says, of the things that we do not see, nothing do we know except by the relation of others.
That's a good point.
Right. It's like we're always relying on someone else's perspective.
Right, we're at the mercy of their interpretation
Exactly.
and their biases
Yeah.
and their potential to exaggerate or even lie.
Yeah, so it's really important to think critically about these accounts.
Totally.
And to consider the source.
Like, is this person reliable?
Yeah, exactly.
Are they trying to sell us something? Do they have an agenda?
Right.
All good things to keep in mind. Okay, so he's skeptical, but he's also curious enough to go on this journey himself.
Yeah.
So where does he actually start his travels?
So he sets off from Rome in 1663.
Okay.
And he heads towards Naples.
All right, so he's starting in Italy.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And he talks about this growing desire to see more of the world.
So he's got the travel bug?
Yeah, he's hooked.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so he's on his way to Naples.
Mm-hmm.
Does anything interesting happen along the way?
Well, he has this one encounter that's kind of funny.
Okay.
He runs into these two Turkish guys,
Mm-hmm.
and they start making fun of his European clothes.
What do?
Well, they take his hat
Okay.
and start using it as a football.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's kind of a silly moment.
Yeah,
But it also shows you that there were these real cultural differences
of course.
and that travelers could encounter some
Mockery.
some mockery, some ridicule,
Yeah, for sure.
just for being different.
It's a good reminder to not take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's had this encounter with the Turkish guys.
Mm-hmm.
He's made it to Naples.
Yeah. And he's eager to keep going,
Right.
but he realizes he has to prioritize the ship's departure
Okay.
over exploring that part of Greece fully.
So he has to make a choice.
Yeah, he can't see everything. Right. He has to stick to the schedule.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so he's on a ship
Mm-hmm.
heading towards Tartary.
Yeah.
And then,
And then they almost get shipwrecked.
oh no.
Yeah, there's this huge storm,
Right.
really violent.
It's got to be scary being out at sea in a storm like that.
It is, yeah. It's a good reminder of how dangerous sea travel was back then.
Yeah, totally.
You were really at the mercy of the elements,
Mhm.
so it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I bet.
But they make it through.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So where do they end up?
They come ashore in this place where there are no inns,
Oh, wait.
but the locals are incredibly hospitable.
Really? So they take them in,
Yeah.
even though there's no place to stay?
Yeah. And he says that they considered it a praiseworthy act to host travelers.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is.
Yeah, it's like a completely different mindset.
Yeah, it's like hospitality was a really central part of their culture.
Yeah, like a moral obligation almost.
Yeah. And it's such a stark contrast to that earlier encounter with the Turkish guys.
Right, totally different vibe.
Yeah, you get the sense that there's this wide range of human experiences that he's encountering.
Yeah, and it's not always what he expects.
Right.
Okay, so they're being hosted by these kind of locals,
Mm.
and are they just hanging out there?
No, they're actually traveling through these uninhabited landscapes.
Okay, so they're venturing out into the wilderness.
Yeah.
And are they doing this for fun?
Well, partly for sport,
Okay.
but also for defense.
They got to be prepared for anything.
Yeah, they're carrying carabines, pistols, even a scimitar.
Sounds intense.
It is. Yeah, they're not messing around.
And they have their trusty dog with them.
Oh, yeah, they have this dog named Pamphagazos.
Pomphagos? What kind of name is that?
It means all devour.
Okay, that's a pretty intense name for a dog.
Yeah, it kind of fits the whole vibe of the journey.
Right, they're out in the wild,
Mm-hmm.
fending for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're traveling through these uninhabited areas. What kind of challenges do they face?
Well, they have to be resourceful.
Yeah.
They find shelter in this abandoned stone house,
Okay.
and they use ferns for bedding.
So they're making do with what they can find.
Yeah, exactly.
That's roughing it.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, so they're finding shelter.
Mm-hmm.
What about food?
Well, he describes killing a hare
Okay.
and roasting venison.
All right, so they're hunting for their meals.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty adventurous.
It is.
And a
Yeah.
little bit scary.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of danger.
Like, they're really out there on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're surviving in the wilderness.
Yeah.
They're facing all these challenges.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we learn about this part of the journey?
Well, they run into some wolves.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's pretty
That's
intense.
got to be frightening.
It is, yeah.
Especially back then,
Mm-hmm.
when wolves were more common.
Yeah, and they have to eat by the light of this tiny wax candle.
Really?
Yeah, so you can imagine how dark it must have been.
Oh, yeah.
And he mentions that their Tartar guide, Caraman,
Caraman.
yeah, was kind of hoping they'd have less to carry.
Oh, so the guy's getting tired of lugging all their stuff around.
Yeah, basically.
That's funny.
It is kind of funny.
It's like a little glimpse into their relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've got wolves.
Mm-hmm.
They've got limited light.
Mm-hmm.
What are they actually eating on this journey?
So they're eating a very simple diet,
Okay,
mostly just what the earth produces naturally.
so like fruits and vegetables and stuff.
Yeah, things like that.
Okay.
And he mentions that they avoid cultivation and winemaking.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, so they're not really into farming or agriculture,
Right.
but they do store provisions for the winter.
So they're prepared,
Yeah.
but they're doing it in a different way.
Yeah, they're mimicking how bees and ants do it.
Okay, that's pretty cool, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
It shows how connected they are to nature.
Yeah, they're learning from the animals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they've got their food situation figured out.
Yeah.
What else do we learn about the people they're encountering on this journey?
Well, he observes that they rarely get sick.
Really? That's pretty amazing.
It is, yeah, and he says that they seem to die only of old age.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable,
Yeah.
especially for that time period
Hmm.
when life expectancy was much lower.
Right.
So what's their secret?
Well, they have this really unique perspective on death.
Okay.
They see it as simply a cessation of action and thought.
So like just the end,
Yeah.
nothing more.
Mm-hmm. And they believe it's completely free from evil.
Huh. That's a very different view than what we're used to.
Yeah, it's a very peaceful and
Yeah.
accepting view of mortality.
Yeah, it's almost like they don't fear death at all.
Right.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So we've got these healthy, long-lived people
Mm.
who have a very different view of death.
Yeah.
What else do we learn about their way of life?
Well, he describes their eating practices.
What-
They eat communally,
Okay.
and they use animal skins as tables and cushions.
Wow. So they're really connected to nature in every aspect of their lives.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Okay, and what are they eating?
Well, they enjoy a variety of fruits,
Okay.
but instead of preserving them with salt,
Hmm.
they use honey.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
Yeah.
And they start and end every meal with milk.
Huh. That's kind of a unique tradition.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so we're getting a good sense of their customs and their diet.
Mm-hmm.
What about their social structure? What's that like?
Well, he specifically mentions the honesty and faithfulness of the women.
Okay, so he's making a direct comment about their character.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's not clear if this is his own bias
Right.
or if it's something that he's observing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely something he felt was worth mentioning.
Yeah, it gives us a little window into how he was perceiving their society.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got honest and faithful women.
Yeah, and he also talks about how generous the locals are.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, they give him a bunch of gifts.
Like what?
Like a tent, a cart, even some cows.
Wow, that's incredibly generous.
Yeah, it really is.
Especially considering they don't seem to have a lot of material possessions themselves.
Right.
So they're giving away some of the most valuable things.
Yeah,
That's really remarkable.
it is. Yeah.
Okay, so they've got these gifts.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do next?
Well, they continue on their journey
Okay.
and they encounter all sorts of interesting things.
Like what?
Well, they find a natural spring
Okay.
and a spacious cavern.
So they're exploring the landscape?
Yeah.
Nice.
They reach this mountain covered in box trees,
Okay.
and they come across this lake called the Lake of Swans.
The Lake of Swans. That sounds pretty.
Yeah, it does.
I wonder if it's really full of swans.
Maybe.
Okay, so they're seeing all this beautiful scenery.
Mhm.
Do they meet anyone else along the way?
Yeah, they run into some shepherds,
Okay.
and he describes their customs.
So they're getting a glimpse into different ways of life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then something really weird happens.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They lose their ability to speak.
What? How is that even possible?
It's not really clear.
So it's like a mystery.
Yeah, and then this guy named Aristides shows up.
Aristides.
Yeah, and it seems like he's able to help them.
So he's like a savior.
Yeah, kinda.
Interesting.
It's a very strange episode,
It is.
but it adds to the sense of adventure.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then
And then,
they have a run-in with a lion.
oh no!
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
That's got to be terrifying.
It is, yeah, but their dog, Aldevour, comes to the rescue.
All devour the hero dog.
Yeah, he really saves the day.
That's awesome.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so they've faced the lion. They've lost their voices.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Well, they take a break to bathe in a lake.
Okay, so they're getting a little rest and relaxation.
Yeah,
Huh.
nice. But Aristides doesn't swim.
He doesn't swim.
No, so he just takes a medicinal bath.
Oh, okay, so he's got his reasons.
Yes.
Interesting.
And then De L'Epy almost drowns in another lake.
Oh, not again.
Yeah. He gets into some trouble.
What happens?
Well, this lake apparently tastes really bad.
Bad tasting lake. That's a new one.
Yeah, and he struggles to get out.
So it's like a near-death experience.
It is, yeah.
Wow, they've had a lot of close calls on this trip.
They have, yeah.
Okay, but they finally make it to their destination in Tartary.
Yeah, and when they arrive, they find this prepared bed waiting for them.
Really?
Yeah, it's like they knew they were coming.
That's so welcoming.
It is, yeah. It's another example of that incredible hospitality.
Yeah, they keep running into these really kind people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're finally in Tartary.
Yeah.
They're settled in.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, all right.
So he starts to describe the origins of this particular community.
Okay.
And it turns out they're descended from Greek sages.
Greek sages, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who, after years of wandering,
Mm-hmm.
settled in this sunny region.
Right.
And they established laws based on the principles of nature. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like a utopian ideal, almost.
Yeah, it is.
So they're not just living randomly.
Right.
They've actually thought about how to structure their society.
Yeah, and they've based it on this idea of following nature.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so they're descendants of Greek sages.
Mm-hmm.
They've established laws based on nature.
Yeah.
What else do we learn about their society?
Well, they built this central city called Heliopolis.
Heliopolis, the city of the sun.
Yeah.
That's fitting.
It is, yeah. Especially considering what we learn later about their beliefs.
Okay.
And they have this governing council
Okay.
of 300 wise men.
300 wise men. Wow, that's a lot of wisdom.
Yeah, and they're led by a guy named Misrjire.
Misrjire, all right.
So it's a very organized society.
It is, yeah.
With a clear hierarchy.
But it's based on wisdom.
Right.
Not like power or wealth.
Yeah, it's all about knowledge and experience.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've got their city and their government.
Mm-hmm. What about their daily lives? What are those like?
Well, they have this really strong emphasis on education.
Okay.
They divide the population into 4 age groups.
Okay.
And they provide instruction in all sorts of things.
Like what?
Like liberal arts, military discipline, moral and natural philosophy.
Wow. So they're well-rounded.
Yeah, they're learning about everything.
That's impressive.
It is, yeah.
And is this education for everyone?
Well, they also have vocational training
Oh.
for people who are less inclined towards the sciences.
So they're catering to different aptitudes.
Exactly.
That's really forward-thinking.
Yeah, and the young women are separately schooled in domestic arts and rural agriculture.
Okay, so there's a gender divide in the education system.
Yeah, which is unfortunately pretty typical for the time.
Right.
But it's still interesting to see how they're approaching education in general.
Yeah, they're really investing in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're educating their citizens.
Yeah.
How do they handle justice and law enforcement?
Well, their judicial system is based on the wisdom of magistrates.
So again, it's all about knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And they really hate banishment.
Banishment.
Yeah, they see it as the worst possible punishment.
Even worse than death.
Yeah.
Wow. Why is that?
Well, it seems like they have this incredibly strong sense of community.
Okay.
And to be banished is to be cut off from that community.
Right. So it's like a social death.
Exactly.
That's powerful.
It is, yeah. It shows how much they value their social bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And they have these communal magazines.
Magazines.
Yeah, or storehouses.
Okay.
For distributing necessary provisions.
So they're sharing their resources.
Yeah, it's a very collective system.
That's kind of socialist.
Yeah, a little bit.
Interesting.
And they're really hospitable towards foreigners.
Oh,
At least for the first few days.
Oh, so there's a limit.
Yeah. And after that, they're treated like citizens.
So they're welcoming, but they also have boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense.
But he mentions that not many Europeans travel there.
Really? Why is that?
Well, it seems like it's either because they don't know about it
Okay.
or because they don't think it's beautiful enough.
Huh. So they're missing out.
Yeah, seems like it.
Okay, so De L'Epy's one of the few Europeans who's actually been there.
Yeah.
And how do they react to him?
Well, they're really curious about him,
Okay.
especially the philosophers.
They probably don't get many visitors from his part of the world.
Yeah, and he ends up forming this close friendship with a young philosopher.
Oh, that's nice.
It is, yeah.
So he's got an insider perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he's excluded from public affairs because he's too young.
Oh, that's too bad.
But it means he has a lot of time to show De L'Epy around.
Right. He's the perfect guide.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does he learn about their architecture and their city?
Well, he notices that the houses are pretty low
Okay.
compared to the public buildings.
Huh. So they're prioritizing communal spaces.
Yeah, it seems like it. But the public buildings are really grand.
Oh, how so?
Well, they have lead roofs, copper domes, gilded gutters, columns made of porphyry.
Wow, that's fancy.
Yeah, and they use serpentina and lapis lazuli to decorate their Duomo.
That's some high-end stuff.
It is, yeah.
So they're not afraid to show off a little.
Yeah, they clearly have some wealth,
Mm-hmm.
and they have this fountain in the square of schools
Okay.
that's adorned with a large heron.
A heron. That's cool.
Yeah, and then there's this other really magnificent fountain
Okay.
in the square of the council wing.
All right.
And this one's really interesting.
Why is that?
Well, it depicts the Copernican system of the universe.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Like the heliocentric model with the sun at the center?
Yeah, exactly.
But that wasn't widely accepted in Europe until much later.
Right.
So how is that possible?
Well, they claim they've known about it for over 1,000 years.
1,000 years? Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing.
It is.
It would mean they were way ahead of Europe in terms of astronomy. That's a huge claim.
It is, yeah.
And it makes you wonder what other knowledge they might have.
Right.
That's been lost or forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so their fountain is showing the Copernican system.
Yeah, and the sun globe at the center of it
Mm-hmm.
actually emits watery rays.
Wow, that's a beautiful image.
It is, yeah. It's like a symbol of their reverence for the sun.
Right, because we know that's a big part of their beliefs.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've got these amazing fountains.
Mm-hmm.
What about their government? How does that actually function on a daily basis?
Well, the 30 leaders of the council,
Right.
they hold these daily meetings in the Great Palace
Right.
to discuss matters of justice
Okay.
and other public affairs.
So they're running the city?
Yeah, it's a very structured and organized system.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the government working.
Mm-hmm.
The fountains are flowing.
Yeah.
What else is happening in this utopian society?
Well, there's this really interesting story
Okay.
about a young philosopher named Philaretes. Yeah.
Okay.
And he's in love with this woman named Orania.
Or a Wayna.
But there's this other guy who's also in love with her.
Oh, so it's a love triangle.
Yeah, and it gets pretty dramatic.
How so?
Well, Philaretes is so desperate to win her over
Mm-hmm.
that he challenges the other guy to this dangerous chariot race.